Don't look at me. Come on. Don't look at me like that. You know why you're here. Go ahead, get out of your system. Ooga boing. Ooh, humna, bonk, 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 bonk. Ooga. Can't blame you. People like hoinky doinkies. That's why it's there. Lust is part of who we are. Why fight it? Terato Tamer is a short game that I made initially for GMTK Jam 2022, where the theme was Roll of the Die. I wasn't able to finish on time because I was busy when the jam was going on, so I decided to work on it a bit after the jam was over to add some more polish and characters and whatnot. The game's fairly simple. It's a turn-based game where you try to seduce monsters to get them to stop killing you. When you seduce them, you can talk to them, and if you pick the right options, you can, and then recruit them to fight for you. All of your actions in combat are based off of the dice rolls between you and the enemy. For example, if you seduce, then your success is based off of the difference between what you roll and what they roll. When the enemy attacks, you have an option between blocking and dodging. It's a risk versus reward situation, where if you pick block, you're playing it safe by resisting damage, but if you pick dodge, you have a chance to ignore damage, which can also lead to taking a lot of damage as well. Since on their turn, they roll before you do, so you can plan ahead for what you want to pick. Ideally, you want to block if their roll is high and dodge if their roll is low. The gameplay itself is semi-inspired by Darkest Dungeon, with the camera zooming in with attacks along with having a separate gauge aside from the health bar, like the stress meter but for the bad guys and in the opposite direction. The dice rolling mechanic with the block and dodge is inspired by the combat from 100% Orange Juice, which is an online board game that has a bunch of anime girls in it. It's fairly simple, yet it has a hint of strategy to it. One thing I should point out is that attacking and seducing enemies actually synergize with each other a bit, where you can seduce enemies easier if they have low health, and they take more damage when they have high lust. Knowing this can make some of the enemy fights easier if you're struggling with your rolls. There's only 7 enemies, each one having unique effects that spice up combat a bit. The first enemy is Bone Wolf, a wolf-like creature that bursts into your home on the night of the Scarlet Moon. They don't have any direct effects like the other enemies do, but when you recruit them, they actually gain health points for every stage you complete. That means by the final boss, you have a pretty decent meat shield if you keep them the entire game. The second enemy is the Succubus. They have a lust heal effect, which means they gain 1 health point every time you seduce. This will make it harder if you start off attacking and then try to seduce, since that would make your next seduction rolls less effective. The third enemy is the Void, which is of course a reference to Project Malice. This enemy can counterattack, which means if you have a recruit, then they take 1 damage for every time they attack. The fourth enemy is an Endurian, which is actually short for Endurian Witch, because the full name couldn't fit on the screen. I'll get into that later. They have a multi-attack effect, which means they will attack both you and your recruit at the same time. The fifth enemy is Marmot, which is a reference to Buckler 2 and Roseblade. They have a 7-sided die. Don't ask me how that works, which means their overall rolls will be higher. He also has 7 HP. The sixth enemy is a vampire, who has Health Leech. He gains health every time he lands a successful attack, and he also has 8 HP. The seventh and final enemy is Krishella the Moon Goddess. She has 10 HP and rolls with 2 dice instead of 1, making her the hardest enemy since her output is literally doubled. After you defeat her, the game ends. The game takes place on Rungmeria, an Earth-like planet that has been inhabited by humans. This planet is also where Mage Swap and Reversary take place, and it has been mentioned in Clockwatch and Project Malice. In Terato Tamer, an event called the Scarlet Moon is taking place, where monsters and beings who lurk within the shadows are temporarily powered up and encouraged to fight against the humans. Typically, everyone else runs and hides to avoid getting killed, but you play as someone who does the exact opposite. Stephanie/Stefano is a human who likes monsters. Like, really likes monsters. As both a defense mechanism and a source of pleasure, they seduce and fornicate with any threat that they encounter during the night of the Scarlet Moon. They're a teratophiliac, which is someone who has an attraction to monsters. I know that might seem weird on the surface, but I would like to point out that all of the monsters in the game pass the Harkness test, which I would suggest looking up if you were concerned about the morality of teratophilia. I'm going to go over a few notes about the characters that appear in the game for anyone who is interested about the details. Stephanie is the canon character, and Stefano is sort of like a parallel universe counterpart for her. I included him because I wanted to make sure that if anybody wanted to play as a male instead of a female, they wouldn't feel left out. All of their dialogue is gender neutral, so I didn't have to go back and rewrite everything based off of gender, which I didn't want to do in the first place. The Void is basically an umbrella term for all entities that reside within nothing, which includes void matter and void entities. Technically, you could be trying to seduce an abyssal void organ or some similar being. Injurians are a race of humanoids who specialize in studying and using magic. I'm planning on explaining that a bit more in Project Malus, where someone leaves a spellbook on the sidewalk and that gives an explanation towards how magic works and what spells exist and whatnot. Cruz Mage from Mage Swap and Roseblight is an Injurian, who is taking refuge on the planet after getting kicked from the Council of Mages. Zoramir from Reversary is made by Injurians, which they refer to as a Bio-Knight, which is, you can kind of think of it as like a large machine made of flesh and blood, made for the purpose of protecting Injurians. There really isn't a frame of reference for when Terato Tamer takes place in comparison to Mage Swap and Reversary, but there definitely are some relations regarding Injuria and Rungmeria. Marmot appears in Terato Tamer because he accidentally ended up there by traveling through the Cosmic Freeway. Some spoilers here, so skip this if needed. After the events of Roseblight, Blake, Knight, and Marmot figured out how to access the Cosmic Freeway and are using it to go back to Earth to get weapons. While traveling to there, they each ended up getting lost, which is normal for people who use the Cosmic Freeway for the first time. Knight ended up on Earth, but in the wrong time period, which is why they appear in Battery Acid. Marmot ended up in Terato Tamer, where he's trying to find another Cosmic Freeway portal entrance. There's some extra lore about the intergalactic legality of Marmot getting frisky with humans, which Robert Downey Jr. explains under a comic I posted to Twitter recently. Krishella, the moon goddess, is Rungmeria's caretaker, which is an entity that looks after intelligent life on planets that support it. On her ears, she has palette shard earrings, which she received as a gift from the Maiden. This most likely means that they sort of have a close relationship, and they could possibly be a similar type of entity or possibly the same species. I'm kind of glad that I wasn't able to submit to GMTK Jam on time because a lot of the submissions were really good. Like, there's no way I was going to be able to compete with some of the stuff, especially if I somehow managed to finish on time. And that's okay, I don't make games to compete with others. Even if you don't finish a jam game on time, or at all, at least you made something. Actually kind of glad it turned out the way that it did. I'm probably not going to do an extra update or anything, since I like to preserve the integrity of what makes my smaller games special in the first place. So, unfortunately, no sex update. Oh, and just an FYI, since I've been getting some new eyeballs on my games recently, I'm totally fine if people want to form their own groups or communities around my games, as long as it's welcoming and safe. I don't have my own Discord server or interact with people I'm not following on Twitter, or check my notifications on pretty much everything. I did that for my own safety and sanity. If you want to make art or art of my characters, then that's fine with me, just be cool about it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the game. Short and simple and pretty spicy. Yet another example of being able to get eyes on something by adding sex appeal. I regret nothing and I'm glad I made this game. Thank you for playing, and thank you for watching. Like I said, boobs are cool, Jack, and I'm very in touch with my inner artist. Ha 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 ha.